I'm Amanda Walker, and welcome to Inside America, the show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In today's episode, America's baby bust. New data confirms the US birth rate has dropped to a record low, fewer than 1.6 children per woman. That's well below what's needed to keep the population steady, and it's set off a race to reverse the decline.
I can't emphasize this enough. There are not enough people. And I think one of the biggest risks to civilization is the low birth rate and the rapidly declining birth rate. If people don't have more children, civilization is going to crumble.
President Trump is proposing cash incentives, so-called baby bonuses, as his answer to the country's fertility freefall.
And we will support baby bonuses for a new baby boom. How does that sound? That sounds pretty good. I want a baby boom. Oh, you men are so lucky out there. You're so lucky.
Coming up, we ask Americans who've chosen not to have children if a paycheck for procreation is really the answer. Does Trump's $1,000 baby bonus, did it tempt you to change your minds? And we hear one surprising reason why people may be opting out.
It's not a 10-year problem or a 15-year problem. It's a long-standing problem, and that birth rates are falling because children are less useful to households than they used to be.
So, birth rates in America are falling, and the politics around it are heating up. But for many, the decision not to have children isn't up for debate. Donald Trump wants Americans to have more babies, even giving himself a rather bizarre new nickname.
I'll be known as the fertilization president, and that's okay. That's not bad.
J.D. Vance also made his position clear in his first speech as vice president.
So let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America.
The Trump administration is pushing policies to reverse the falling birth rate, which has dropped pretty steadily over the last 70 years. New CDC data shows America's fertility rate is now at a record low, falling from 118 births per 1,000 women in 1960 to just 53.8 in 2024. That sharp decline is raising alarms about the future. Will there be enough people to keep the economy, public services, and society running? There's also a deeper take.
So when politicians say American birth rates are falling and that worries me, they're reflecting two different concerns. One is a little bit driven by supporters of the administration like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, who say, we're going to not have enough smart people around. We are going to need more kids, and we're going to need more smart kids to grapple with AI, which may be smarter than us, or figuring out what to do about climate change, or whatever it is. The other end of the political spectrum is more sadly racist. It's the white Christian majority is diminishing as part of the U.S. population. It's clear that when politicians in the U.S. say not enough babies, what they're really saying is not the right kind of babies, because they're certainly deporting babies every day as part of their immigration policies and sending them back to South America and El Salvador and other places.
Conversations about whether to multiply or not are growing online. From the emergence of so-called trad wives trending with large families.
We have 18 children. I don't know when we've ever had the house alone to ourselves.
No, impossible.
To young couples who are consciously choosing to be child-free.
We left our jobs and sold everything we owned
to take a year-long honeymoon around the world.
Ryan Hunter and Wilmarie Hernandez are extolling the joys of life without kids, documenting their unencumbered world travels.
We are child-free by choice. That's how we define ourselves. And what that means is that we have consciously decided not to have children. So it has been a well-thought choice. I just kept seeing women around me that were mothers being exhausted, not being fully supported in their role as mothers by family, by society, by government. And so to me, it just didn't feel like a path that sounded exciting to go on.
One of Donald Trump's plans to get couples like Ryan and Will Marie reproducing is a cash incentive described on the White House website as a one-time government contribution of $1,000. Does Trump's $1,000 baby bonus, did it tempt you to change your mind?
That wouldn't even cover the birth, like in the United States right now. Like, I've talked to people that have given birth in hospitals, and I don't think that it would even cover the bill, when you get out of the hospital with the baby. So that, to us, that sounds like a joke, really.
Yeah. If you want people to have kids, give them tools to make sure that these kids succeed. $1,000 in a checking account, $5,000. That's not really going to change the tide for someone who actually genuinely wants to have kids. That's not going to do anything for them. It's a drop in the bucket. That's not even diapers. Create a system, a society where adults feel comfortable, where they're hopeful about the future, where they feel happy and comfortable in their everyday lives. We talk to people, and one of the biggest reasons why they don't want kids, aside from the personal choice, is economics. If you can't afford to put a roof over your house, how are you going to afford to put a crib in it?
So for couples like Ryan and Will Marie, no kids is the key to happiness, but there's still a small stronghold of American women choosing to have multiple children. Catherine Pakaluk is a Catholic University economist and mother of 8. In her book, Hannah's Children, the Women Quietly Defying the Birth Dearth, she interviews over 50 women with large families to understand what compels them to go against the cultural grain. In my interview with Catherine, she has an interesting take on the drop in birth rate, starting with a question we don't often ask: how useful are kids these days?
Birth rates have been falling for 200 years. And so this is the perspective we have to take here, which is that this is not a 10-year problem or a 15-year problem. It's a long-standing problem, and that birth rates are falling because children are less useful to households than they used to be. So as soon as I say that, we might think, what does that mean? Children are useful. Well, they used to be very useful for labor around the home. You wouldn't have a great life if you didn't have help at home. And then they were very useful for old age support. And with the advent of pension programs and savings and economic growth, they became less useful for old age support. And then finally, before the advent of effective birth control, children were sort of a price you paid for coupling up. And those three things, labor, old age support, and coupling up, are things that people wanted and needed. And so children don't get us that anymore. So I don't think it's a terrible mystery that birth rates are falling.
Interesting. So going from being a necessity to being a choice, and choice is essentially what all of this is about. And your research has looked into women who've chosen to have 5 or more children. What have you noted? What have you learned from those women who really invested in the idea of having children?
So essentially what we discovered is that for those women, we see really more of a demand story rather than these aren't people who have low costs of having children, right? So we hear a lot of explanations about falling birth rates that have to do with high costs of housing, high costs of making, of setting up your household. And those are interesting stories to a point, except that we had more children 100 years ago when we were all poorer. So what we were able to discover was this very strong demand story. In other words, these are people who have committed to a way of life based on the value of children. So really, really wanting those children. So it's a kind of choice, but it's characterized by really seeing a lot of value personally in having children.
You've talked, with that notion of choice in mind, you've talked about countries getting bossy recently in terms of telling women, you should have more children. Is that helpful?
No, I don't think it's helpful. And I will take it part by part. First, it doesn't seem to work very well. Countries have tried different things for decades. The United States is looking at this problem now, but other countries have been ahead of this curve. So it's not very helpful. It doesn't work very well, first of all. But second of all, it really ignores that micro-level household decision that couples make about their family sizes. the bossiness of some of this policy material doesn't work. Why? Because the types of things that women are considering when they're coming up with a life plan, they are big, meaningful, personal, and cannot be easily sort of traded off in terms of, several $1,000s of tax credits or other types of bonuses.
Let's talk a bit about this pronatalist movement. For people who aren't familiar with it, I'd love you to give us a sense of what it is, but also it's getting closer to government, particularly this administration. What influence, if any, do you see this movement having?
So this loosely aligned group of people who are who share the conviction that we will not have enough workers and that the population shrinking will be bad for us. I say loosely aligned because the components of the pronatalist movement are very difficult to put together in a political box. We have, on the one hand, sort of Silicon Valley or tech natalists, if you will, people who, like Elon Musk, who talk a lot about falling birth rates, but make use of IVF and surrogacy and that sort of thing across the board, genetic selection. Very difficult to put that together with sort of Christian and Jewish traditionalists, people who feel that marriage is a sacred entity where children should be welcomed naturally. Those are two very different positions about how we might go about the process of having more babies. And then on the political side, you also see in the pronatalist movement, I would say nationalists, people who really think that we should encourage more births, but only the right type of births, the births from our home country or the right people. And on the other extreme, you see pronatalists who are for open borders because they think the more people we have, the better. Very difficult to square those two things. This is why I'm skeptical that what we call the pronatalist movement, which includes all of those 4 different positions and many more, could have a very strong influence in this administration or any other, because ultimately those positions cash out in very different policy suggestions.
We spoke to a couple earlier in the show who decided not to have children, and they said the focus shouldn't be on cash incentives, it should be on creating a better support system in society that makes people feel optimistic and like they can handle having children. Look at Norway, for example, which has incredible support, 1 year paid family leave, statutory preschool childcare from the age of 1, yet their birth rate is falling. I think it's 1.44 at the moment. How do you square that? Do these measures essentially not work if people just don't want to have children as much?
Yeah, I think that's one conclusion, which is somewhat sobering, right? That something is needed, right? Something is needed. But what we're trying to understand better now is what is that thing that's needed, especially when people say that they want to have children. It would seem that the type of support that's useful is more local and maybe more spiritual. And I'm going to say that in the broadest possible way. In my community, for instance, when women have a baby, neighbors and friends show up with meals. Now that it probably doesn't have the same cash value as some of those social supports that you're talking about in Norway, and yet it really fills the emotional part. That seems to be what government policy can't accomplish.
As we bumpily sometimes move closer towards equality, is this a natural consequence of women realizing that when they have children, however supportive their partner is, they are the ones who make more sacrifice, they are the ones who have a heavier burden, they are the ones who have to work harder. Therefore, it doesn't seem as attractive anymore. Is that just the way we're evolving?
Yeah, I think there's some evidence that this is the case. It's such an interesting question about kind of how couples handle the burdens of childbearing. This is one of the things I discovered in my research, that while the women who made these choices to really invest in children, they were unusual. I like to say their husbands were more unusual. So lots and lots of stories of really, I would say, heavily invested partners. I would say of my own husband, he does a lot at home, right? So how do we find more men like that? You know, if women would like to invest at work.
Other reasons people are giving, aside from choices, climate change, making them not want to have children, economic instability, global conflicts. Those things aren't going away. So in the face of all of those things, is it an impossible task to try and reverse the decline in birth rates?
Yeah. Well, what you're highlighting is that it's a scary thing to have a child. I think there's no way around that. It's a scary thing. And it's easy to point to reasons why you wouldn't want to jump. I mean, having that first baby is such a big life change. I mean, I remember it for myself. I thought my life would never go back to normal. People need some kind of assistance to get over that. Risk-taking is a kind of risk. It used to be that you had your children really young. And when you're young, it's easy to take risks. What we see now is that the people who are finding it easiest to transition into marriage and childbearing are from these kind of, I would say, living religious communities, be they Jewish, Christian, what have you. And the community gives them that sense they can get over that riskiness. In the absence of that, in a more secularized society, this is what's happening. People thinking about the risk of having a child and saying, well, with climate change, with the political instability, it's not a great time to do something risky. And I see that. But given that challenge, is it impossible to reverse the birth decline? And I would say no. I would say that actually the stories in my book, I think, are quite hopeful because many of the people that I talked to did not intend their large investment in childbearing. So what changed them wasn't a policy or a particular program or social structure, but actually typically kind of witness encountering people who really believed in the value of children and had devoted their lives to it and in a sense mentored them into that way of life. Now, I think this is something that's accessible to countries and to communities, but it has to happen on a kind of local level.
You don't share that alarmist response that we're hearing from politicians, but is there anything about the fall in birth rates that does worry you?
Yes, I'm worried in general, but not alarmed. Worried the economic stagnation won't be good for people. I love economic growth. It's been just a tremendous driver of human flourishing generally. I got into economics because I thought, well, if you want to improve global health, improve how rich people are. So I'm worried about that, but I'm not depressed about it. I think the thing that worries me most is that for a given population size, when family sizes are smaller, people have fewer aunts and uncles, cousins, brothers and sisters. And so there's a kind of accidental individualism that can occur. Accidental because nobody planned it. It's not because you read bad books or you had a bad political philosophy. It's that you just are less connected. Everybody that you want to be connected to will require some effort. Whereas, your brother, love him or hate him, he's your brother.
Natural connections.
Yes, natural connections. So that's been eroding, I think. And that's probably the piece that saddens me most. But again, I'm optimistic that we can make different choices. Humanity course corrects all the time. And if we think back 50 years ago, we were really worried about overpopulation. And we thought everybody would just have too many children. In fact, we didn't. And we are past the point now where we will not worry that the global population will not continue to rise. So if we course corrected in the past, we will course correct again. And that is because humanity is just incredibly good at responding to local conditions. So I think we'll get through this.
So interesting insights there about the huge range of reasons that might be contributing to this decline. Most of them very hard to control. And both pronatalists and those opting out of parenthood tend to agree that President Trump's so-called baby bonuses are unlikely to move the needle. In fact, most Americans don't think boosting the birth rate should even be a government priority. Let's take a look. Just 12% say it should be a top concern right now. That's according to a recent poll. So if Americans aren't asking for this, why is the government pushing policies around fertility? Joining me to discuss are Shakira Jackson. She is CEO and founder of Uniquely Engaged Citizen, and Democratic political strategist Sherry Jacobus. Thank you both for joining us. So Shakira, first of all, is it a smart move for men in suits to be essentially telling women to have babies?
I think it's important that we acknowledge that there is a decline in birth rates right now. So no matter who's saying it, men, women, That's a fact. So we need to be looking at strategic ways to improve this decline. And so wanting first for the Donald Trump's incentive, I think that it's a really great incentive to encourage families to not only improve the birth rates, but get back to America's traditional values of family and valuing family. So I think it doesn't matter who's having those conversations, it needs to be said.
$1,000. I mean, we spoke to a couple earlier in the show who laughed when we suggested that might change their minds to have children. Is it going to change anything, Sherry?
Well, first of all, it's an abhorrent thought that the men in suits, as you called them, would even have anything to do with family planning other than letting people have the freedom to do what they need to do. The economy is such where people cannot afford to have all those children. Birth control means that many women don't want to have that many children. And when you look at the underlying agenda, I just want to note here, Project 2025 supports all of that. And there's a report that the White House, the Trump White House, wants to have a National Medal of Motherhood to moms in the United States who have 6 or more children. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler had a similar cross-up honor of the German mother for women who would have lots of babies, except for Jewish women. So I think it's important to understand the underlying agenda here because it's very dangerous. But again, the economy does not allow or really make it easy for people to have large families. And freedom of choice is something that American women want. College is expensive, housing is expensive. So unless the Trump administration is going to institute policies that make it easier and more affordable for people to have larger families, it simply isn't going to happen.
But if this is about simply maintaining population growth, why not focus on immigration instead of birth rates? Can you really change a woman's mind? What this ultimately comes down to is personal choice.
I think it's important to consider the sustainability issue of this immigration integration with this specific issue, especially given America's values and people coming in with great merit, going through the process. It's important that we have these things in place. People always want to point the narrative, oh yeah, immigration can fix this, immigration can fix that. But no, that's not what America was built on. America was built on being able to come here, being able to be free, but also coming here the right way. So just pouring people, letting people come in, that's not the answer, and that's not a sustainable answer.
Sherry, what about this pronatalist movement, particularly from J.D. Vance and his perspective? He frames large families as a kind of moral or even religious duty. So if it's rooted in those traditional family values, is it kind of like promoting a specific cultural vision of America?
Absolutely it is, and it's about they want to control women. They want to set the women's movement back by decades, and the American women simply aren't going to do that. They also very specifically want these advantages to go to married couples with children, straight couples, so they are excluding people. They're trying to socially re-engineer the United States into what their image is of a healthy society, which is not the vision of most Americans, by the way. So that's not freedom at all. They also seem to be, if you listen to Elon Musk and what he has to say, he seems to be promoting eugenics. He thinks, and he is a white supremacist. He, from South Africa, we know this. And so there seems to be this underlying vibe to all of this that they want more white babies in America. They do not want brown immigrants. And I think that's what you're getting at. So I'll just say it outright. We already know what they're doing.
Shakira, I'm sensing that you don't agree. Tell me, is this a racist policy? Is it a racist policy?
Oh my goodness. This is the problem that I have with the left. They always try to make everything about race. And this is coming specifically from a woman of color, okay? A woman who identifies as a Black African American. I'm so tired of the left constantly trying to make things a racial issue. And often than not, I'm so sorry, I don't know what your ethnicity is, but it's often Caucasian women who tend to want to push the racial narrative of, oh, it's a racial issue now that they don't get their way. And I think that that's completely, it's an abomination, to be honest, if I could be exaggerative. But I think sometimes we have to look at this more from a more analytical perspective. Look at the evidence, for crying out loud. What can we do? How can we fix this issue? It really is a grassroots problem. The problem, even looking at cultural and religion, the policy that Donald Trump put in place was specifically influenced by, I would say, what's going on even with Hungary. They put in a policy as well that really helped the 1-to-4 ratio or something like that, where you could have a child and get an incentive as well. So it was really influenced from that as well.
It worked for a while, but then it dropped off. And then you've got other countries like Norway that we talked about earlier that have got really good family policies in place, hasn't actually changed their falling birth rate. So what is the solution here? Does there need to be a solution, or is this just society evolving, women having more choice and deciding, hey, maybe this isn't for me, I'm the one who has to bear most of the burden of having kids?
When birth control became available, women chose to have fewer children, and a lot of that was economic. I do want to say, by the way, I'm a former Republican, and I'm only quoting what I've read about what is really behind. I'm not bringing up race for the sake of bringing up race. This has been documented. This is quoted. Elon Musk has said some things which we don't need to go into all of them now, and he has retweeted certain things, as has the president. So this isn't just relying on race and falling back on race. It's a very real issue in this country, regardless of what color I am. But with regard to women and the freedom, look, you can have policies that make it easier and more affordable for Americans to have the size of family they really want to have if they want more children. A lot of people might like to have more children if it were more affordable, but they want to be able to afford college and a home. And they can't do that with the current tax structure. If you tax our billionaires at the same rate that they did pre-Reagan, we would be able to do all of that. In the 1950s, you could raise a family of 4, own a home, have 2 cars, and you could do it on one income. That is not possible today. The percentage of the income that it would take to pay for college, to buy a home, all of those costs have gone up, but wages have not. So if you want to give people the choice to have a bigger family, to have a better lifestyle overall, you can implement policies to do that so that they have that choice. But that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about simply giving birth to put more babies out there for the sake of putting more babies out there without any idea how a family would be able to afford to raise them.
Okay, really interesting debate. Thank you both for your time. We've got, I think, over 3 years to see if the baby bonus actually works and boosts birth rates. Thank you both for your time. That's it for this episode of Inside America. Do join us next time.